Hey everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Here we are.
Here we are. This is the second time we're using the remote website to record. Did we do it last time when you were in Panama? Guatemala,
Mm,
honey.
Guatemala. Yeah,
Guatemala. Yeah. Wow, I felt like it was like 8 months ago.
it
Time is
probably
weird.
was. I don't even
Time
remember at this point.
time is weird. Um but what we're doing now is which I wanted this. I said this in our meeting last week or 2 weeks ago about like what should we do with the podcast, and I was like, we need to talk to people that aren't us. I would like to interview people that aren't the same chuckleheads you see that just work here. Who else could we possibly talk to? So look at
Well,
that,
and
making it
now
work.
our first volunteer.
Yes.
Our first volunteer,
Super excited.
and hopefully it won't be the last time we have her here. Supriya,
Yay.
welcome.
Thank you.
Yay. You are new to the Yoga Farm team, working with Kundalini Warrior and Spiritual Warrior.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
Awesome. In what capacity are you? What are you doing with those two teams?
I will be teaching the Ayurveda curriculum, and I think that's just kind of on the surface of it. I'm really into the elements and understanding your own body and understanding kind of like what your body is trying to tell you and interpreting those signals. So, yeah, just really on the journey with everybody.
Awesome. I am so excited because I know very little about all this stuff. I will say, honey, you can chime in and see if that's accurate or not.
No,
No, I don't know.
it's inaccurate. I
Oh.
think if we created a continuum of like knowing very little about Ayurveda, yogic practices, all those things, and then being a master at it, that you are very far on that, much further on that continuum than most people that are your contemporaries. I would say that.
Oh, okay. So you're just comparing me to other middle-aged white men,
Yeah.
and I'm doing better than the bar's pretty low. I mean, which I'll take it. I will
Well,
not
I
sneeze at a
like.
compliment.
I think that we could say to you, knowing what you know about your constitution and how you move through your day, you're very aware of what would be a great start to your day and what would be the start to your day that's going to mean you're going to take a nap by 11:30 in the morning. So I think that you have not just like an awareness and a fundamental foundational knowledge about things. I think you can apply them to your life.
Right.
And that's a lot.
And even when I don't apply them, I think I do a pretty good job knowing, because we have a pizza place that's down the street from our house, and they have 2 slices for $5 like every day. So on the days I would go down to the studio and record podcasts, I would of course grab 2 slices of pizza. And then by the time we would start recording after setting up and driving down, I would just be sitting there with my tea thinking, I am tired. I don't want to talk for an hour. I'm sleepy. But I have the wherewithal to say it was the choice I made, and I know what that is. And that wasn't right for my dosha. Probably wasn't great for anyone's. 2 slices of pizza before just something. I don't know. I'm not the expert.
Hello.
Supriya will answer this for me better. But maybe 2 slices of pizza aren't motivation fuel. But I don't know. Supriya, tell us. I mean, you're working with the team primarily. It sounds like in the Ayurveda classes. How did you come to that, or what is tell us a little bit about like your experience with learning Ayurveda and how you came across that, and yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's been a journey for me actually. I started out in public health back in the day. I still am super huge into social justice and advocacy and really giving people a voice who don't always have a voice and letting people be heard and letting people be represented. And I used to volunteer as an EMT firefighter, so that actually took me from public health into medicine. So I got my medical degree from Brown, and I really found that while I really wanted to be in the space of being a healer and being in the space of helping people, and being in the space of helping people heal themselves and come to wholeness within themselves, that unfortunately medicine is just very siloed,
Hmm.
and it doesn't always really give patients the time to be heard and seen, and the system is set up so that it's really based on prescribing medicines retroactively as opposed to proactively preventing
Hmm.
disease. So I wanted to find a healing modality that I felt better represented my values. And my parents come from India, so a lot of Ayurvedic based techniques are things that we grew up with. And I was like, oh, I should delve more into this. So I became an Ayurvedic wellness coach. I'm pursuing further trainings in Ayurveda right now, and it's really been amazing to bring together the sort of East meets West knowledge. So, looking at things from a medical perspective, but then also saying, well, what are the Ayurvedic qualities here? And so, how can we look at this more at the beginning processes? How can we see where this is starting in the body? How can we see where dis-ease is starting to settle in and start to kind of address some of those underlying factors before it progresses further or creates um, further feelings of discomfort?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just reflecting on the amount of times that I've just told Jeannie something like, I have this thing and it hurts, or this thing feels weird, or what's going on. And she's will immediately won't even say. It's so funny because I'm thinking of my upbringing, whereas like my mom or dad would be like, "Oh, get this out of the medicine cabinet,"
Yep.
or
Yep.
"Go get this and take this medicine and do this."
Yep.
And I still have that kind of voice in my head. But honey, your response has always been like the, "Oh, well, because of your dosha, and you ate this or did this, or you have not been doing this to move this energy." And I don't know how long it took for those answers to be met with sincerity instead of sarcasm. Because initially it was like, sure, okay, I understand. My vata's out of balance,
I was gonna say, at least you're
whatever.
listening. Most people in my life, I tell that to, and they're like if I tell that to like my partner or my parents, they're like, "All right, thanks for the information. We're just gonna go back to doing what we were doing." And I was like, "No."
Thanks
Mhm.
for the info. Where's the Pepto Bismol kind of thing?
Well, I think also I don't have a whole lot of attachment when I tell anybody anything. I don't know if this was training that I received raising children, if it was training I received teaching high school,
Hmm.
where I just say things and everyone else goes, hmm,
Yeah.
and then
Oh.
proceeds to do whatever they were going to do anyway.
Yep.
I have very low attachment, if any at all, to how it's going to be received. So you can come to me 50 times about heartburn when you eat soft cheeses, whatever. I'm going to say, maybe this is a thing. And we could look at it like this. And I'm just going to keep saying that kind of on repeat because I also have the stamina to do that. You know, the my constitution gives me enough um conviction to just be like, well, I already said this, but I'll say it again. And still not be attached to anybody picking up that information. I do think that there were a couple of I think there were a couple moments probably where I was like, well, just try this for like 2 days and maybe you won't feel anything different. And that's great. That's fine. Good
Hmm.
information to have. And you did probably to a little bit prove me wrong, if I know you. And it was helpful. And so you were like, oh, okay, well, if this is helpful, then maybe other things are too. It's not like you are super resistant like other people in my life have been. And it's harder. You know, there's a lot of things about more holistic approaches to health and well-being that it's a longer road. It's a more sustainable road, but it's a longer road. And I think that we have been conditioned to like, well, why would I change this habit and then maybe in 90 days I'll feel a little bit different, as opposed to I could take this medicine and maybe I will feel different in 3 days, you know. And that's an extreme example. I just think about uh some of the things that take a little bit longer to integrate within the body or into your habits for them to be steady. Whereas a lot of prescriptions within 24 to 48 hours, so you're going to feel something different.
I think also, so I think it depends, right? With some movements, with some practices, you can start to feel a change right away. With some prescriptions, it can take 6 weeks to start to feel a difference. So if you look at depression and SSRIs, it can take 4 to 6 weeks to start feeling a difference. Whereas certain practices or certain lifestyle changes, you might start to feel a difference in a couple weeks. Just to like give a counterexample. Um, but also, I think there's an element of personal responsibility that when you have to take responsibility also for changing your behavior and your lifestyle, and that can be really difficult to do. And I think it can be really difficult because in, we're conditioned to look to blame. We're conditioned to look to say, well, why is this a problem? And why is really not a great question. It's not one that's really productive. Um, and so I think that there can be a lot of shame and blame that comes with, well, oh my goodness, did I create all this discomfort in myself? If I could have been doing this all along, like all these like spirals, all these what ifs. And sometimes it's easier to take a medication than get caught up in that. Not that I think anyone should ever get caught up in those sorts of loops, but unfortunately, I think a lot of people do.
Mm.
I think you're right. I think like I also think just personally, there's a little bit of a placebo effect that can happen immediately upon taking a medicine, And I grew up in a actually very my grandmother, I think she desperately wanted to be a nurse, but grew up in a family and a culture where her her job really was stay home, raise children, or be a teacher. Those were the two acceptable things in her upbringing. Two choices she could have made. She made the choice to have a family. Um, and I think she just so desperately wanted to be a nurse. So she thought that any and every medicine was a miracle. And like my grandmother's medicine cabinet, like I think that she would just talk doctors into prescribing things so that she would have them at her house in case any of us needed them. Or she just had so many children that like the doctor was like, all right, here, I'm just going to give you 4 prescriptions for an antibiotic because if one of your kids has something, the rest of them are going to get it. So it was like she had a pharmacy and her medicine cabinet was in the kitchen too, which I always found really interesting. So I grew up in that place where like, well, there's a pill for that. Like there's literally a pill for anything. And and not just prescription pills. My grandmother was also really into vitamins. Like before anybody else's anyone was taking vitamins, my grandmother was like, you take a vitamin every day, a multivitamin. Um, so that was just the environment to grow up in. And I think like sometimes there's that part of our brain, when you get into like, I'm going to take pills, whether they are Ayurvedic herbs, whether they are some kind of like compounding pharmaceutical, whether they're a prescription. It's like, oh, I can feel this. I can feel this working. I don't know if it's working. I think like the first time I actually took ashwagandha, I was like, today is way better already. And I had taken it once. And but I had that mindset of like, this is a solution. I'm going to take this
Mm.
thing. It is a solution. I'm going to have a better outlook on life when taking ashwagandha. And boy, did I feel it 4 hours later.
Well, I think, honey, and Supriya, you both said the thing that I kind of jotted down and thought of, where it has to be habit changing, and it's very hard to do, because you could do it for 2 days, but does that change a habit? No. I mean, it needs to be prolonged choice and decisions that can be tough in the long run. I mean, I think initially it depends what it is. Sometimes at least I'll speak for myself, found myself after 1 or 2 days feeling like good that I made a decision to try to do something where, oh, I will eat this for lunch instead of this, and like, oh, I'm making a change and it feels good, and then maybe it actually feels good in my body, which, as far as Ayurveda goes, it seems to be what is going to be the best fuel I mean, among many things, but from my takeaway in the experience, what is going to be the best fuel for me to keep moving and not kind of like grind to a stop? And that A has been tricky. B, it's usually the opposite of the delicious thing I want, but ends up being better for me anyway. Um, so
Mm.
yeah, habit changing is hard.
I think you make a really good point there, though, that there is, right, reward pathways in our brain that are activated. So when you make a choice and you're like, oh, I'm doing this thing, right? Like whether it's going on a run or getting an award or just making a different choice for lunch when you've been resisting it the whole time, you're like, oh, I'm overcoming this resistance. I'm doing this thing
Mm.
I've told myself I'm going to do. This is really exciting. Like it does activate reward pathways in our brain. It does activate that dopamine pathway. So absolutely, there's a real visceral change in our body when doing that.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that.
Mm. Yeah.
I love it. And I think it's just so funny to think about the brain component in these habits that we change and shift. And, you know, there can be a focus in understanding Ayurveda of like, what is your daily routine? And daily routines can get really extensive. And like if you just kind of pick up an Ayurveda book and you read like what you're supposed to do, like I remember just being like, well, I can do maybe 3 of these things. There's no way that I can, um do oil pulling, neti pots, abhyanga, dry massage, oil massage every single day. Like I do actually have to do work and I can't focus on 9 million things. And so I think that one really valuable approach is making incremental changes and sticking with that over time and not kind of creating this huge long list of must do's and
Mm.
can't do's and then try to follow them all day long, because I think that that's where we lose a lot of people when we approach it that way. um I thought it might be interesting to think about to like share with everybody what some of the daily habits are that we do have beyond like the foods that we eat. Like what are some, we can use the official Ayurvedic dinacharya word, but like what are the daily well-being routines that we have in place, and kind of just share how we all approach that, because I bet we have a lot of different answers, a lot of different ideas of approaching like just consciously bringing routine and habit into your day for the sake of your overall vitality,
Mm.
feeling like you don't need to take a nap at 11 o'clock in the morning, feeling
Mm.
like you're not coming to a grinding halt, feeling like, or like your anxiousness is just off the roof and you can't even sit still for 5 minutes. There's lots of different ways we can feel out of balance. Um, yeah. So,
And just along with that, Jeannie, I would just add that everyone is going to have a different daily routine. Like what works for one person won't work for the other. And I mean, beyond just the obvious, that's true for anything, but like try it out. Try a couple things out, right? Like maybe you really don't like neti pot, it just dries you out too much, but maybe nasi oil is good for you. Maybe you just don't like nasi oil at all, but you like oil pulling. Like try out different things. Again, you don't like choose one or two, but try out a few of them just to see like what works better in your body because everything's going to work differently for you.
yeah, I think that's such an important point. And it's a little bit like stepping up to the Ayurvedic buffet. I think about the buffets kind of tend to have a negative connotation, but like, it's the place where like you can try with very low pressure a bunch of different food. And if you don't like it, that's okay. You can go back to the buffet and you can try something else. And you're not making this decision to make this massive life shift without even trying that out. Um so
Or
I
like,
think
I was just like, just because you try something doesn't mean you're now committed to it forever.
right.
Like, I feel like for some reason people are so there's like change is weird and scary and hard. And it's like Supriya said, just why don't you just try it? And it doesn't have to be the most simple, basic form of the thing. It doesn't. You're not signing a 30-year mortgage. I mean, you could stop it tomorrow if you really, really wanted to. If it ended up not working, yeah.
Yeah, and like I think sometimes it's this tricky balance as educators, as facilitators, as teachers, because if we give like the just just try a few things out, like we throw out just try a few things. For a lot of people, they're like, but what things? But
Mm,
what things do I try? And what is also true about being exposed to the structure of Western medicine is we abdicate a lot of our own experience and power to the perceived experts. So we're also super used to being like, but just tell me what to do. Just tell me. Tell me how to fix this. Tell me what to do, as opposed to here are some options. Why don't you try them out? And then also think about, is this actually sustainable in your life?
mm.
Is this a sustainable choice? And how do you feel when you do it regularly? And take that data as just as important as Supriya said when she uses nausea oil, she sleeps better. Like that could just be true for her. I just made that up. I don't know if that's true. And so, like what is your experience with a thing? And is that actually sustainable in a regular level busyness day, not Sunday, not on your downtime, but like, can you actually sustain this regularly? Uh, yeah, all good things to think about as we throw some fun activities at you that we do.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, Jeannie, because I feel like, for example, Abhyanga, oil massage, is a great remedy that Ayurveda uses for so many different things. It's grounding, it's soothing, it moves the lymph, it moves the blood, it improves circulation, it can help with detoxification, like you name it, it can do it. But it takes a long time, and then like you have to like have special clothes because everything gets oily and gets oil all over them and smells like oil. Like it's not very sustainable for most people on a regular basis to do a
Mm.
full abhyanga. So I absolutely agree with you that some practices are nice to know and nice to have in like the back pocket to pull out when you need them, but they're not necessarily always sustainable.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you with the oil all over your clothes thing. Holy crap. There was a period of time where I was just like, what is this fabric? And if I have oil all over my body, am I going to see oil spots all over my clothing? Like cotton leggings,
Yep.
pulling those on, forget it. You're just like, you're creating oil stripes on the legs of your pants that will never wash out
Oh no, no,
ever.
I have to separately launder any clothes that have oil on them because otherwise all my other clothes also start to smell like oil.
Yes. Yeah,
So pro
yeah.
tip, wash your clothes separately.
Have the clothes that you put on just to wander around in as the oil absorbs in your skin after Abhyanga. Yeah. Mhm.
Nice, honey. What practices do you want to start with? Like, we,
Well, I think
we're,
so. Outside of like the category of yoga, right? And things that we might think of as specifically Ayurvedic dinacharya things to
mm,
do. I would say that with the amount of kapha that we have, the amount of earth and water, heavy on the earth that we have in this household,
yeah,
particularly now that we don't have the added elements of children and their schedules, like it is super important for us to get up out of bed. Like there's a threshold. If we do not get up out of bed when we first like open our eyes and drink some coffee, we can hang out in there for a long time. Like before we know it, it's Sunday at 11:30 in the morning. So, I'm not saying just simply getting out of bed is a daily practice, although it is. How we're moving. So we go on daily walks. We go on a 2-mile walk. Like this is an important part of our routine of the day. And it doesn't always happen at the same time because our schedules can shift. But it does happen. It has to happen. Um,
A quick
or I,
question: is it happening during kapha hours? Like,
Ooh,
is the time of day for us to move? Was like between 10 and 2? Is that it? No.
no,
mm-mm,
those are pitta
no,
hours.
no.
Okay.
Yeah, we kind of
Oh,
try to bank on those pitta hours to get us
okay.
Momentum.
out the door with shoes on. That's me. I don't want to put shoes on ever. And hopefully dressed appropriately for the weather. We're kind of using pitta time of day to our advantage to be like we're walking. It's like a lot of times we've been working for a few hours, like full stop, go for a walk, take like that break away from the computer screen too. So um yeah, that's a routine that I would say is an essential part that is different than something like oil pulling, for example, which is also can be an essential part for some people's constitutions to have that in their day.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
say for me at least, so I have a lot of Vata Pitta in my constitution. So for me, winding down at night is really important because otherwise I will get all my crazy ideas late at night. I'll be like, oh, I've got to keep going. I got to do all the things. And before I know it, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, where did the time go? I'm like, oh, I've got more to do. I'm like, wait, I need to get to sleep. So for me, really finding like that, like finding space to ground and settle and add in that earth element at night is really important. So I like to do like a foot massage at night, just like really simple, whatever moisturizer I have around, and then like warm socks. And that is so grounding. Like
Hmm.
warm socks, foot massage, just like super, super grounding for me. So that's something I like to do. I like to do a 5 to 10 minute meditation at night just to like settle in the energy and be like, all right, tomorrow is still going to be there. We can do all these things starting tomorrow, but right now is the time to like settle and ground. I personally like to cook a lot, so I cook my dinners. I cook them every night. That just brings me a lot of joy, but also just like that time in the kitchen. That like now my body knows that it's preparing food and it's preparing food that's going to nourish me, and so now it's time to like settle and have dinner. So I think those are parts that are really important in my routine. More focus on the night.
I
Cool.
love that
It's
there's the different ends of that. Like, I'm like, before I know it, I'm still in bed and it's 11:30 in the morning, and you're like, before I know it, I'm doing shit and it's 4 o'clock in the morning. Like,
Yeah.
never a concern in this house. Never a concern that it's ever going to be 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't even know what 4 o'clock in the morning looks like.
no, yeah. It's the thought I just had listening to both of you talk about the practices. Knowing your dosha it's going to either help you to get going or to help you slow down. It's for as the kapha in me, it's just how can I start moving and at the right amount of activity so I'm primed and ready to go for the day but not tired, right? I think lately my habit has been honey, while you're still sleeping, I am up at not 4. I'm awake by 6:45, 7, and then by 7:30 it's like I will go down, I'll make the coffee, I'll take the dogs out and be outside, um, 15, 20 minutes, and then it's like even that level of activity is enough to kind of like get me going. And if like I mean I used to be able to like go for a run in the morning and then go to work. Those days are in my rearview mirror. But now, definitely, I can even if we did like half of our 2 mile walk or a little bit less in the morning, like right at waking up, that would be good. But if I had to do even a 2 mile walk with the dogs, like we've been doing in the afternoon, in the morning, that would be a little counterproductive because it would just be a little
Yeah.
too much for that time. Yeah,
Yeah, you wouldn't feel like you still had energy left
yeah,
in the afternoon, because there were mornings through the summer too that you were getting up at like 5
hmm
and going and golfing
yep,
for a couple hours in the morning, and your
right,
energy would wane by the mid-afternoon. Um another thing that we both do that kind of sustains that, like, that, I want to say, like, an even flow of
Mm.
energy and sharpness throughout the day is we meditate twice a day. So we meditate first thing, still in bed, meditate.
Yeah,
And
well, if we're in bed till 11, yeah, I mean
you don't mean on days we're in bed till 11. This is not common.
that's where it's
Okay.
happening.
This is a slippery slope that can happen. This is not a regular occurrence. We
Yes, it
have
is.
tops.
It is happening on our predetermined weekend days.
Yeah, that's where it is the most risky, is on a weekend. Um, but then to kind of like break the day in half before post work, evening, that kind of stuff happens, or it as a break because I'm teaching in the evening. So I need like a pause on the day so that I'm not just working from the time I get out of bed till the time I go to bed. We meditate again. So it's like these two moments of 20 minutes. And again, like for us, it's how to be alert and aware, but in a meditation rather than, you know, again, the slippery slope is lying down in Shavasana. Like, don't, we can't do that. I'm so jealous of people who are like, oh, now that, I'm just gonna lay down in a Shavasana and reset my body. If I lay down,
Mm.
it, I think I could be anywhere. I think I could lay down in the middle of Times Square. I think I could lay down. At the moment I laid down, my body's like,
Mm.
oh, we're done. Cool. Okay. Full shutdown
Yeah,
for 8 hours.
definitely. There are some times where our 3 minute shavasana after meditation, instead of just kind of like blinking my eyes open and like stretching and taking deep breaths, it's like I'll just like slither down
Yeah, it's not good.
and just like lay down. It's like, yeah, this is just going to be a nap now, which is not the best, but I don't know.
I'll just say from
It's
my
not the
perspective,
best.
there's
No.
nothing wrong with naps. I am a huge fan of naps personally. Sometimes if I'm just like, I'm really tired and I want to like do like X, Y, and Z things throughout the rest of the day, I'm like, it's a 20-minute nap time. And I lay down. And I don't know. I've been taking naps since college. So my body will be like, okay, going to bed for 20 minutes. And I'll go to sleep for 20 minutes. I don't even set an alarm. It wakes up roughly 20 minutes later, sometime between 15 to 30 minutes. It'll wake up roughly 20 minutes later. And I'll be like, oh, I want to sleep some more. And body will be like, nope, time to get up and get going. And I look at the clock and it's like 20 minutes later.
Wow.
So
Man, without an alarm, we could sleep for an hour and a half
it's been a
easily.
thing since
That's what
college.
happened. That's what happened the other day. Like, it was our day off, right? It was Monday,
I think it
I
was
think.
Monday. Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
So we meditated, and then in true like lot abundance of kapha fashion, we're like, let's just lay down after meditation. It's our day off. I opened my eyes again at 6 p.m. I was like, this is not good. This is not good. I'm not gonna be able to go to sleep tonight. And any kind of like, I can't go to
Yeah.
sleep in 4 hours now. So it's just so interesting to be able to hear like how our different bodies, like, this is what I love about Ayurveda. It's one size fits one, and we're just kind of doing our own little human experiments with these vessels we're walking around in, to see what works and what doesn't work for us. I know for me, I cannot eat anything heavy in the morning. So if I'm going to eat before noon, which is rare, I can do intermittent fasting and not eat until noon and feel okay. Like after I hit 12:30, 1 o'clock, if I haven't eaten anything, I just get a little loopy. Um, but if I eat in the morning, that has to be something that is either like light protein or fruit. It's like a one or the other. Those two things are like, they feel good, they digest well at that time of day. Like, I feel good eating them. My brain feels turned on, but my, I don't then have this like sugar spike and then want to go to sleep again. So I've had to figure that out, through the years, and just experiment with it. So like I have my kind of standard breakfasts that I can eat. And then I also know, like, if we go out to like a diner and I eat waffles, that's it. My day is done. I'm not doing anything the rest of that day that has to do with my brain. It's completely going to go to sleepy town, even if my physical body doesn't. I feel very foggy. So, just another routine thing that I have around schedule and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally intermittent fast as well, and I know constitutionally you're not supposed to do it. You're not supposed to quote unquote do it for about the, especially for about the pitta. But I found I respond a lot better to intermittent fasting, so that's something I personally do as well. But it doesn't work for everybody. Some people it works for, some people it doesn't, and it's about, like you said, experimenting to find what works for your body. So.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, I reflect back on some of the things I would eat and the times I would eat when I was teaching in a public school. I mean, if I was lucky, I'd be able to eat something first period of the day, which is like 7:45 to 9:20 at some point. And I would eat like yogurt, which is not the best thing for kapha. Is that true?
I think that's more not the best thing for you because I do think you have a dairy allergy. I think that's more about your dairy
Wow.
allergy.
Wow. Talk about one size fits one. You just hammered that point in. Awesome. Yeah, so there's that. But then also having to eat lunch at like 10:30, right? And it just seems it's just like never feeling like my body is in the rhythm I want it to be for what I have to do. There was always that kind of in the back of my head where like, God, if I could eat an hour from now instead of right now, boy, the rest of the day would be so much easier. A lot of that.
Yeah, and I think how we eat has a lot to do with it as well. Like, for example, when I was in consulting, I was in pharmaceutical consulting prior, and it's such a culture of like, of stress, of always on the go, of always needing to like push out the next deliverable, and people are like eating on camera, in meetings, on the go, in the car, and it's just like it's hard to feel settled, and it's hard to like ever digest your food when you're always eating and always constantly surrounded by like the stress. So
Mm.
like for me, intermittent fasting was a time to be like I know I'm not going to digest my food right now. I just know it's not going to happen, and so rather than being like uncomfortable this whole time, I'm just going to wait, and then when I can comfortably settle and prepare food and then eat it in a way that's going to be really soothing to my parasympathetic nervous system and really help that rest and digest process, that's when I'm going to sit down and enjoy what's before me, as opposed to like people who are like trying to like eat and talk during a lunch meeting.
Yeah.
Well, just the culture too of like this is so different in Europe as well. Like when people gather to eat in Europe, it's an event. And it's always an event. It's an event multiple times a day. And you kind of stop what you're doing and you create this whole experience and ritual around a meal. Whereas it's so different in the US, like it's not uncommon for the norm to eat a salad standing over your kitchen sink.
Right.
Like
No, it's true.
before you
So
go
true.
and, and do the next thing. It's like
Yeah.
I can house this salad really fast. Like, oh, but I'm eating a salad. It's so good for me, right?
Right.
And then you have all the digestion issues that come with eating raw leafy greens really quickly, standing up,
Yep.
and wonder why we have all like agitated and slow digestion.
And then not just that, but
Um,
then you get hungry 2 hours later because you weren't actually able to process the food that you ate, and then you're like, now why do I want like why is my body craving sugar? Because it's craving that like extra energy. Because now you're not nourished.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I mean, and it was tricky. So for us, like we don't have kids at home anymore, and
Here,
I
wait, honey.
realized I've
See, can you raise your hand? Like this hand that's at the side of the screen. No, other one. All right, let's do a high five because there's no kids in the house.
oh
Pew. Oh,
Okay.
there we go.
I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah, sorry, that was a long-winded bit. I'm sorry it took so.
You did great, babe.
Thanks.
So I'm realizing how much of my life habits and routines were dictated by these three other beings that lived here for all of my life. Like they just dictated everything. And in some really beautiful ways, one of which was we did always sit down as a
Mm.
family and eat dinner, for better or worse. I don't know if it was exactly relaxing for anybody, but we did it. We're going to sit down, we're going to have dinner together, we're going to talk about our day. Inevitably, someone is going to fight with someone, and there's going to be a sibling dynamic. 100%.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I
so
mean,
I don't know if my nervous system was calm that whole time, but there was a ritual around food. Then the children all moved out, and I'm like, what is the point of dinner? I could not wrap my head around why I was doing this. Like, why am I cooking food? There's only us. This is so silly.
yeah.
Like
And at
there's
some
no
point,
point in cooking food that's for me.
that's your attitude, and I'm just sitting here like, no, oh, okay.
That's like I still would like to eat, even though there's no children in the house to feed.
Which
So
I hate saying that because it just makes me seem like a big man baby. Where it's like, where's my food? But at some point, I'm like, I'm just going to take the reins myself, and I
it's
will
true.
figure
It's
out what
true.
we're eating.
So Matt's turning into the household chef, and lately I mentioned this last night. I'm like, look at us sitting at the dining room table. Look at us. We're doing such a good job sitting down and eating dinner, because it's even harder because we are constantly home. We work from home. So I feel like in some ways when I worked, I'm just thinking about when I was working at the massage school, like we had a break room. And so it was kind of part of the culture there during lunchtime. And there was a lunchtime where there weren't, classes happening. The break room, everyone would kind of go in, and the refrigerator's in there. The stove is in there. People were cooking, people were making things, bringing in their lunches, and we would all sit down around this huge table and hang out and chat and have lunch together. And it was pretty, like, for the most of the time it was pretty calm and sweet. There were some times where like maybe something was going on at work and we would have to discuss that, but it wasn't like working lunch. That wasn't
Mm.
the intention. And again, for better or worse, those massage school teachers, they had work boundaries. Those ones, they would be like, no, we're not talking about work right now. We just got done teaching for 3.5 hours and we're just going to eat our lunch. They were so good at setting that tone within the break room. So you just sit down and eat. And even that doesn't happen when you're going from Zoom call to Zoom call, or you're teaching, or you're doing computer work. It's like, I can go through my emails while I eat lunch, sitting at my desk upstairs. Or it can be a full stop. We sit down at the table and we eat. I mean, I think yesterday we ate lunch at the table even,
We did.
and did not have any kind of devices out when eating dinner. We were on the porch. So I guess it's better than sitting at the desk.
Yeah.
So I think that that's such a huge point. Like, even when we're not looking at shifting the routine of what we're eating, how we're eating it is a hugely important element. And I'm so glad, Supriya, that you brought that up, because I just don't think that it's talked about a lot, that this is a disruption to our systems.
Mm.
Yeah, no, and I
Mm.
think that you bring up a really, really important point, which is the lack of boundaries from working from home. Because ever since COVID, a lot more people work from home than before the pandemic. And I think a lot of ways that's blurred boundaries in a lot of different ways, whether it's the hours that people work. Because before you would go to the office, you'd be at the office, and at a certain point, even if it's super late at night, you would still leave the office, and you would leave the office, you leave work at the office behind you, right? And then you would go home, and there was kind of like this physical separation. But now, since everyone's working from home and everyone's trying to, I guess, quote unquote, prove how quote unquote productive they are while still working from home, and they're like, oh, well, I can multitask and do the laundry and do this while I'm still working. So I like working from home, but boundaries have gotten completely blurred, right? People are working till 10 o'clock at night, and they're still checking email and responding to email. They're going to bed with their phones next to them. They're getting up in the morning. They're looking at their phone first thing. They're responding to work emails. Like, boundaries have gotten so blurred with working from home. And it's really hard to set those boundaries for yourself, especially in a culture, in a work environment where no one else is setting those boundaries. Everyone else is feeling the stress of it. Like, you're not alone. I think a lot of people think, I look at everyone else and they seem to be handling it just okay. What's wrong with me? Like, no, nobody's handling it okay. Everyone is super stressed out about it. It is wreaking havoc on everybody's nervous system, but nobody's talking about it. Everyone's just like, oh, everyone else is doing it, so I have to do it as well. And so I think setting those personal boundaries is really, really difficult in some of those work environments, but really, really important. Like, you can't always be on. And unfortunately, like, working from home has really like created this blur where people are like, well, we're giving you this quote unquote benefit of working from home. So now we kind of just expect you to always be working since you're always home.
Yeah, it's something. I mean, I noticed it because there are no boundaries, honey. Looking at you. So one of the things I did a couple years ago, where I said, okay, at 5 o'clock we have to stop. At some point, we have to stop working, even if, like, you had a class to teach. Maybe it was a little earlier. It was like 3, knowing you're going to teach from 6 to 8, something like that. I would say work is officially done, and me saying that was not enough. Like many things, I talk and just no one listens. So I'm like, I got to do actions. I need something. Like, I have to do something else. I'm kidding. But
Mhm.
one of those things, two things. I said, okay, it's like quote unquote cocktail hour, which it could be we're gonna have it could be, oh, we're gonna have a cocktail because dinner's coming up, or it's just we're gonna drink anything, water, tea, and then also like put it's as simple as like putting music on in the kitchen to say, okay, this is now cocktail hour, quote unquote. Let's listen to like some of this music, and we're just going to sit and pause. And it was that, but we really had to be intentional. Like, it's one of those things. I think we're going to look in 5 years from now. There will be enough time and study to like look back on this work from home period to like have some perspective and say, okay, yeah, nervous systems are a mess and there was no boundaries. It's like, well, how do we move forward to improve that? I think it's something people are aware of, but not something that they are thinking to mitigate or solve. My answer is cocktail hour. I guess that's my answer. But I mean, it was very intentional. And honey, you can chime into its effectiveness. Like, I don't know, it's still up in the air.
I think it's very effective. Like, and and I just have to say, like, it's effective not because cocktail hour necessarily includes some kind of substance that is going to calm everybody down and make them step away from work, because a lot of times my cocktails are like cranberry juice and tonic water, because mocktails are fun
Yeah.
and they're pretty. And they're bubbly sometimes, which I love bubbles, and that feels like a treat, to have a like little bubbly drink. Um,
It's
so
got a champagne celebratory special thing kind of feel. I get it.
it does. I mean, bubbles are just fun. And I also know Ayurvedically, I cannot drink bubbles all the time. It's not
Hmm.
good. I don't, I won't get into why. Right now, just bubbles all the time is not a good idea. Um, So it feels very like special occasion, and I love a ritual. So like throw a
Mm.
ritual in there of we're going to
Yes.
make these cutesy little drinks, and we're going to turn on music in the kitchen, and when you turn on music in the kitchen, it's usually um a very seasonally appropriate soundtrack, or you pick a composer that has a particular vibe. So what was it? Danny Elfman radio. We were listening to Danny Elfman radio
Yeah.
yesterday. So it's
Right. What we
all
got?
like, it sounds all very spooky, right? It's, you think about the soundtracks that he has done, the movies that he's done. So it just changes the energy in the space, and it creates this pause. I think what stood out to me about what Supriya was saying around this boundaries and working from home thing is that when work from home became mandatory, right? That it was kind of like we're all taking one for the team, right? We're going to stay home. We're going to keep people healthy. We're going to do this. There was still a lot of skepticism from our capitalist mindset that people are not going to work if they're at home. They're going to goof
Mm.
around, you know. And there were gifs and memes and all those kind of things out there, like kind of perpetuating that idea that like we're on the clock and we're laying in a hammock in the backyard, or we're on the clock. And I think for a long time it was like, oh, people aren't really working, they're home like having sex. Like that was a thing that everyone was like, you're paying your workers to not work. And so I think that for a lot of us, myself included, it was like, oh, well, God, I mean, like I'm actually doing a lot of work at home and I don't want people to think that I'm not. Um, and then when it was like, okay, well, everybody can go back to work, and there was that pushback of like, well, do we need to? I mean, first and foremost, how much time are people saving not being in traffic and not doing commuting, right? So, do I need to spend this time in the car? And there was that, I don't want to have to go back to the office. And yet again, it being met with, well, that's because you can waste time at home. And so I think you're 100% right. There's this idea that like I have to prove my busyness, and then the boundaries got even more leaky and even more leaky, because if I have this luxury of being home and oh gosh, I did stop working for the 5 minutes it took to load the dishwasher, so I guess I better now work for 2 more hours this evening to make up for the fact that I loaded the dishwasher in the middle of my day. And no real recognition of how much time is wasted in an office. I mean,
Mm.
Exactly.
back to when I worked at the massage school, like my God, I would go dance around. Jessica and I worked together at massage school too. So I danced myself over into Jessica's office, sit in the corner of her office and eat chocolate and talk to her at any given time during the day. And I was never like, oh gosh, I'm getting my work done. I'm prioritizing things. I wasn't wasting a day. But this idea that because we're at an office, that all of those hours between 9 and 5 are full of nose to the grindstone, like that's an illusion. There's so much goofing around. The more human beings who get in a place, the more goofing around there's going to be too. So,
Absolutely.
I think like everybody could use that pause and reflection and perspective of like, do I have that thought that I'm worried that people are going to think I'm not being productive because I'm at home?
And I think there's
And is that blurring the boundaries and the lines?
And I think there's two really important parts there, Jeannie, that you just brought out. One is the human interaction, right? Like we all need human interaction. We all need that time to like go and chill out. And like that's why I used to be like, right, meeting at the water cooler or like the coffee maker or whatever, right? Because we all need that human interaction and that dynamic to create better teams, to create teams that actually want to work with each other and want to like support each other and want to work together. So I think that's a really important part of it that often gets missed. And then two, it's like this constant need to prove like I'm so productive. Well, if you're in the office, then we're just going to assume that that was all productivity, and if you're at home, we're just going to assume that we're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. We're just going to assume that you're always not being productive, and this constant need to like quote unquote prove how productive you are, which honestly leads to less productivity because then you're just constantly stressed and underslept and not able to think clearly and not able to get work done as efficiently. And so and then just leads to longer work hours. So it's just really counterproductive in so many ways.
Yeah. So last time we talked about Ayurveda, we did it in the summertime for the particular change of season. Is that right? Like, what is like the Ayurveda of the seasonal change? Is that what we did, honey?
Well, I think we were more so just talking about how the team handles all this extra fire, because we've got some fiery
Mm,
people on the team. And yes, we did discuss that. And we're no longer in Pitta season right now.
right. I guess that was my kind of question was, what is the season we're in now? And what does that mean for, I guess, like, what does that mean for me as a kapha in this time of year type thing? Like, do things change? Like, how does, like, what, like, does that affect, you know, that's my question. So I don't know if that, does that make sense, honey and Supriya?
Good
Like the,
question. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are in Vata season now. So this is the season of air and ether. You can feel it, literally the winds of change. Like I can feel it in the morning. Like it's a cooler breeze. You can see the leaves start to change colors. The leaves start to fall down. So a lot of the air and ether. I think specifically to your question, so kapha, a lot of that earth energy, a lot of that heaviness energy, I think using the lightness of the air and ether, using it to go for early morning walks, using it to unleash some creativity. I think that really leaning into the air and ether can be really balancing for kapha season. So if you find yourself experiencing a lot of more kapha type symptoms, a lot more heaviness, a lot more of the denser energy of kapha, lean into the seasonal changes um, to help add that lightness. Like instead of it having to be all the work that you're doing yourself, like lean into what nature is giving us and use that lightness and spend more time out in nature to kind of like to kind of help that heaviness along. Yeah, absolutely. So we are in Vata season now. So this is the season of air and ether. You can feel it, literally the winds of change. Like I can feel it in the morning. Like it's a cooler breeze. You can see the leaves start to change colors. The leaves start to fall down. So a lot of the air and ether. I think specifically to your question, so kapha, a lot of that earth energy, a lot of that heaviness energy, I think using the lightness of the air and ether, using it to go for early morning walks, using it to unleash some creativity. I think that really leaning into the air and ether can be really balancing for kapha season. So if you find yourself experiencing a lot of more kapha type symptoms, a lot more heaviness, a lot more of the denser energy of kapha, lean into the seasonal changes um, to help add that lightness. Like instead of it having to be all the work that you're doing yourself, like lean into what nature is giving us and use that lightness and spend more time out in nature to kind of like to kind of help that heaviness along.
it's so funny. You said, when you said Vata is air and ether, from a work point of view, like if I'm just thinking about coworkers or jobs, air and ether are the two qualities that I've had trouble. Usually because I find myself easily slipping into, like, how do I get not focused, but like organized and grounded? That's very easy for me. So if I'm with someone who is less grounded, it can go either way. Like you're talking about the season in the fall, I'm like, I love this. Like, and walking around outside, especially this time of year, I'm just so into the change and this and the winds and everything, and I'm just into that whimsy, leading into it. And other times in my life, in other situations, I think this whimsy and change is too much. And it's like, I don't know, how do I deal with it? Or like it's I'm not leaning into it, I'm resisting it, kind of what it is. But yeah, it's just sometimes that air and ether is hard. It's hard to lean into. And I don't know, honey, that's where you come in. You probably have more than that than I do.
I mean, I think that everybody has vata. Everybody has all the elements. So, like, it's like, where does it reside? Where
Mm.
do you notice it? And because sometimes it's hard to see ourselves, right? Like, we have preconceived notions about who we are. We also have conditioning around the things that we have done in our life that we got positive feedback from, and the things that we did in our life that we got negative feedback around. So I could be presumptuous and say that perhaps you received some negative feedback in your life around being whimsical and creative. And therefore, those aspects of yourself you suppressed because you weren't getting positive reinforcement from being kind of dreamy or, you know, overly kind of head in the clouds, thinking, dreaming, inventing, creating space. Like those things were not rewarded enough
Oh,
in
you. You don't think Jim and Ellen O'Neill, the Irish Catholics, leaned into that? You think? You're not sure?
I mean, I'm guessing around some of that.
I'm kidding. I'm joking. They're
So
wonderful people.
what I
And
think is what I think is true is that you are a very creative person. And so knowing kind of like how we know that we can pick a time of day to go for a walk. You can know that you have the support of elementals coming in this season to support your creative flow. And also to recognize exactly what you said. You have some resistance. So where did that ultimately come from? And could it be about something that actually doesn't have to do with the people around us, right? It's just sometimes they mirror a behavior that we either feel like we can't do for some reason, and therefore we're resentful around. Like, how come you get to be whimsical and creative, and I have to be, the steady rock that does the things, right? So just examining that kind of stuff.
geez, well, I was not expecting to have to handle hard hitting questions like that on Wednesday afternoon, so I will bypass that until a later time. Thank
But I
you.
mean,
I do think it's funny though because we were out. I don't know if it was yesterday, or the day before, when we were on our walk, and we did both have a little bit of a temper tantrum around wind, and that we don't like wind and how agitating it is. Like
Mm,
I don't like it either. I hate wind. The
even
only
like this
place
this time of
I'm
year, wind
I
is
hate it.
bothering you?
I don't want to
Okay.
be out in wind. I don't want wind blowing my hair. I don't want wind in my ears. I don't want to hear the wind. I hate the wind unless I'm on a beach.
Well, I mean,
Unless I'm
yeah.
on
the
a
wind.
beach.
I'm like,
Oh,
carry me along, wind.
Well, I
no.
was just thinking that. I mean, thinking Vata Pitta. Like, how do you feel about wind? Are you like, this is my thing? This is where I feel my power through this kind of element. Where we're just like, "Ah, grumpy wind."
I'm like, carry me along, wind. Take me wherever you want.
Mm-mm. No. I'm like, wind, cool it down. We've
I'm like,
stop it.
I don't want to stay in one place for too long. Like, let's go explore. Wind, where are you taking me now?
That's
And
amazing.
apparently Matt and I are like, we will die here. Right here.
Yeah, I will
It's
have
so
the.
good though. It's just so, and I know like we're at that point where we got to start wrapping up, but I can't help but think like one of the most important aspects of understanding Ayurveda, understanding the elements, understanding the doshas and how these things interplay together is so that when we watch other human beings around us do things that seem completely different than the ways that we would do something, we can meet that with like appreciation and curiosity rather than judgment or thinking like these can't get their shit together, just floating around on the wind all the time, right? Like, or these sticks in the mud. Like, are you serious? You want to live in the same place forever? Like we could be so judgmental until we step back and we see that this is yet another way that our diversity and the ways that we show up differently in the world is a strength. And if we all did things the same way, we would get nothing done ever. And it's just I always just love that reminder about Ayurveda because it helped me stop comparing myself to other people, comparing my behaviors, comparing my body, comparing my habits, my proclivity to sleepiness. Like, and instead I just see like, oh my goodness, we're all so interestingly different. And I love it.
Yeah, well, I always go to that moment in massage school. It was like my second day teaching there, and one of the teachers was doing some talk with like a whole cohort, and he was asking for like questions or people to chime in. And this student I mean, God bless her. She must have been 21, 22, right?
That,
So
yeah.
the teacher asked the question. She shot her hand up and she says, "Well, this makes me think about me." And I don't. Were we in the same room? You were there with that, right, honey?
Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah,
was the
we did this energetic. Looked at it. I don't think we actually did one of these things, but it was the energy did. We energetically kind of met each other, and we're like, "Yeah, I bet it does." You 20 something, right?
if you look that way, I can look this way.
Right. Yeah, it was one of those, and I think what the this is like Ayurveda among things like Enneagram, right? It's a great tool to learn about yourself, and I think unfortunately sometimes people only think about it as themselves instead of, like you said, it's great for that, but also it's like if I know someone is a 9, or if someone has a lot of Vata Pitta, then I say, oh, okay. Not only do I know that going in, but I know that they will have characteristics and qualities that I don't have as much. Then, and that's like that energy is complements each other, and it's not something to say like, oh, you're different. It's weird. It's like, oh, how are you different than me? What can you do that I can't do, and vice versa, and stuff like that. So,
So true.
hmm. Well, Supriya, how was your first podcast experience?
I love it. I wanted more.
Yay! Good. Yes. Excellent. Um, yeah. Like, please, any. I love like sometimes random questions people. I mean, honey, sometimes I think to you like say you ask me a question about something we heard or read about, and I say, you know what, that would be a great podcast topic. Let's talk about
Mhm.
it in front of a microphone. So like anything, any kind of question, any sort of thing comes up, or a student has a question, and it's like, you know what, this would be fun to hear from the team. Like sometimes I think of it that way too. Like, what is Jeannie or Jess or Sabrina or Josh like? What would they say to that? And now Supriya. So I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Supriya.
Thank you guys so
And
much for
we're
having
about to
me.
start both of our programs this week.
Hmm.
And so I think student questions, and using them as topics are going to be plentiful because students have really great questions throughout both the 200 and the 300-hour programs. So it'll be nice to be like, oh, a student had a great question in class today. Like, let's all talk about it on the podcast. That
Right.
could be really fun.
Yes. This is your official invitation and encouragement to write to me in Slack with anything to say, hey, it'd be cool to talk about this. More topics is always good. So anything that lights you up and it's like would be fun to talk about, please don't hesitate to bring that up because I had fun doing this and love to hear different voices, especially from new people on the team.
Yeah.
So
Hooray.
hooray. So for the Wi-Fi pod, this is Matt.
This is Jeannie.
And this is Supriya.